Stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with Deborah Roberts about Lessons Learned and Cherished, the teacher who changed my life. The book is a collection of essays from Roberts and celebrities, including Oprah Winfrey, Brooke Sheilds, Octavia Spencer, Spike Lee, Ann Pachett, Lucy Liu, Al Roker, and many more. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Deborah Roberts is an award-winning ABC News Correspondent and co-anchor of the news magazine 2020. A media veteran, Roberts has traveled the world for her reporting, and she's also served as a substitute anchor for Good Morning America, as well as a guest co-host on The View. Deborah, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's start with the inspiration for this book. Why did you want to write the book, and why did you feel like now was the right time for it?
Well, you know what? I have often talked about my teacher, my grade school teacher, my English teacher, Mrs. Dorothy Hardy, when I have gone out to do speeches and talked about women and empowerment. I would often talk about her as a woman who was influential in my life. And I would always notice how people would come up with their own stories of their teachers. So clearly this was a moment for a lot of people in their lives that is so memorable. And couple that with the idea that as a journalist, I'm so acutely aware of this period that we're in, which is kind of a crisis, really, when it comes to the classrooms in our country and education. Teachers leaving the profession at, record rates, 60,000 teachers last year leaving their jobs. This year, we'll see what that number is like. School systems all around the country having trouble recruiting teachers. Reading numbers like the job satisfaction is at a 50-year low. And I just thought, when you think about my memories of my teachers or other people talking about their teachers, if I bring it up, and juxtapose that against what we're dealing with, I thought maybe it's time to focus on teachers, to write a book that might remind us of how important they are. Because right now, teachers don't feel very highly regarded. They don't feel very prized for what they do. And I thought maybe, and especially the more I started talking to people, I thought this could be a love letter to teachers right now to remind them that what they do matters and that people really do have great, great memories of teachers who've changed lives. And so that was the beginning, and it just sort of took off from there.
Well, this is a collection of essays, so tell us about the people who agreed to share their memories of their teachers with you.
I had a great opportunity having working here at ABC News and having had opportunities to run into people at Good Morning America here and there. I think it was just I started with my colleagues, Robin Roberts, Michael Strahan. We're sitting on the set. We're talking about this. And they, oh, my gosh. And Robin started with her teacher, and Michael would talk about his. Then I ran into Christy Turlington Burns, the model and an activist who was talking about maternal health when she was coming off Good Morning America one day. And I said, Christy, I'm doing this book. What do you think? And she jumped in. So it just became this rolling thing where anybody and everybody I ran into, Daniel Boulud, the noted French chef, he happens to be a friend, and I ran into him at a restaurant, at his restaurant, and I mentioned this, and he said, "Oh, my teacher, Mrs., when I forgot her name, in Lyon, France." And I said, "Oh my gosh, we've got." So it was one of those things where just people, Oprah Winfrey, I've had an opportunity to know Oprah a little bit. I emailed her and she said, "Oh my gosh, everything I am is because of teachers." And I knew she had paid great tribute to her teacher, Mrs. Duncan, over the years. So it just really became kind of an easy sell. And anybody I bumped into, I would just ask. I mean, Lucy Liu, the actress, I just DM'd her after seeing her at an event that we both were participating in. And like a few days later, she DM'd me back and said, "I'd love to do it." So it was just, friends of mine, my husband. I thought, okay, I got to include him in the book. So, and he was really, of course, I've heard him talk about Mrs. Fryer, but he was delighted to be a part of it. So it was one of those kinds of things that just started rolling. And once it did, I couldn't stop it.
There are so many essays here, and it begins with your essay. So tell us about the important teachers in your life.
Well, Mrs. Hardy, I started off talking about her because she was my English teacher in 6th grade in small town Georgia, Perry, Georgia. And this was just a couple of years post segregation. It was like during our integrated school system. And Mrs. Hardy was this prim, proper teacher who just demanded excellence and proper grammar and diagramming sentences and learning poetry, and don't chew gum in her class and don't be late for her class. So she demanded not only greatness in the academic world, but just in presentation, the way you present yourself. And most kids feared her, but I actually was intrigued by her. And when I realized that I did well on one of her tests once because I was sort of trying to rise to the occasion and she praised me for it in that Southern way, I was just like really taken by it and not realizing at the time. She was kind of lighting a little fire in me to want to achieve and to dream a little bit outside the box. I mean, small town Southern girl, like learning, poetry from about some of the greats and Emily Dickinson and talking about, Shakespeare and all of that. I just thought, wow, this is something else. So she started it, and then of course I had other teachers that I talk about in the book, including a librarian in high school who not only was just interesting and informative to talk about her life. Her husband was in the Air Force and she traveled the world, but she taught me yoga. She started talking about the importance of wellness. And this is before we were talking about wellness in the way we are today. And she did a little yoga class after school for some of us who wanted to stay. And it just made me feel so worldly. And like I was somebody who was very interested in sort of looking at the world from a global perspective. So all of these teachers just contributed something that just helped me see myself a little differently. And that's what I gleaned from all of these folks who contributed something to the book, that they had a teacher or a professor or a principal, a school principal, who saw something in them and led them to believe and to see something in themselves.
I'm talking with Deborah Roberts about Lessons Learned and Cherished, the teacher who changed my life. And our conversation continues in a moment. If you appreciate this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you'll know when I post new interviews. And thank you. There are so many wonderful stories here that people shared with you, and I know it would be difficult to pick, but maybe if you think of one story you might want to share that they shared with you in this book.
Well, you know what? I mean, you know how parents say you can't pick your favorite child. I'm not sure that I can really pick my favorite essay, but there are some that stand out. And when I'm looking at the book right now. Shameless plug. And I'm looking, down the list of folks, for different reasons, people stood out for me. I mean, Misty Copeland, the trailblazing ballerina with the American Ballet Theater Company, talked about coming from a family that was dysfunctional and they were homeless from time to time, and having a teacher who bought her ballet slippers because she believed that Misty had a talent, and she kind of almost funded her that way to get her started. Just a remarkable, lovely story of appreciation and generosity on the part of a teacher. Oprah not only made me almost cry thinking about being seen and about her teacher, Mrs. Duncan, but made me laugh out loud when she talked about seeing Mrs. Duncan in the grocery store in sneakers outside of her usual uniform. And she was like, "Teachers go to the grocery store?" I mean, I fell over laughing because can't we all relate to that story of seeing your teacher somewhere outside of the school building and freaking out? So she just sort of took me back to that child who was very impressionable about the teacher in your life. Who else? I mean, so many of them. Melody Hobson tells a story. The financial guru talks about a teacher who was really hard on her, but how she learned grit from that teacher. So it wasn't like a happy-go-lucky story of just generosity and beauty and all of that, but it was also about toughness and how that made her who she is today, who is, which is this world achieving, a financial genius. So there were so many that just stuck out in so many different ways that I enjoyed, hearing, and just you could just hear the lilt in the voices when people would start to talk. Octavia Spencer, the actress, talking about when she was a little kid, and the teacher said, "Well, you all need to comport yourselves a little better." I mean, look at Octavia. And Octavia went, "Oh, she's talking about me," and how that just left an impression on her that, it wasn't just about the lessons that you learn and what you do on your papers, but how you bring yourself to class. And that's more than anything else what I learned from all of these people, is that the lessons that were greatest for them were not about the aid that they got on that assignment or the project that scored something really big, but the moment that a teacher did something, said something, reached out and extended something to them. That was more memorable than, just academics alone.
So it was important that the teacher saw them. But the other gift that you talk about, the teacher's gift, is the ability for the child to see themselves differently.
Yeah, exactly. And so many people said that too, that, it wasn't just about the teacher saw me. Jenna Bush Hager tells a story about, her twin sister growing up with a twin sister. Her sister was more gifted academically. Jenna was not. And she was becoming a little bit of the class clown just because she wasn't doing as well academically. But her teacher, one of her teachers, actually pulled her aside and said, something to her about reading, because she knew that she really did like reading, but encouraged her to read certain books and said, you have the capacity to be, you could be. And Jenna said nobody had ever said that to her before, you could be, to get her to think beyond this moment of what she could aim for. And that changed something for her. So, people who are from unlikely circumstances experience that. And that was something powerful, I think, to learn.
As you mentioned at the top of the interview, there's so many challenges today for someone who wants to enter the teaching profession or just stay in the teaching profession. So what words of encouragement would you give to a teacher who might be watching this now about hanging in there?
That's a very good point. And I mean, that's one of my messages in general, is about hanging in there, whether it's the journalism profession. And I've had moments, ups and downs of, moments where I just felt like it was just too exhausting and too hard. And certainly being a young mom when I was in the business at a certain point, finding it difficult. I mean, I always talk about hanging in there, but I think for teachers right now, it's hard to hear that message because they are up against a lot. They are dealing with, burnout in a big way. Students who don't necessarily seem to be, as engaged, parents who aren't necessarily supportive, school systems that are demanding a lot of them with so very little. There was a great article in Time magazine just a few weeks ago that the title said it's even bleaker for teachers than you think. And it profiled some teachers. And, one young teacher who's only been at it for like 3 or 4 years, and she was just starting to get it. Her love for teaching is there, but she's like, I just can't keep doing this. They're demanding so much. They have maximal demands with minimal resources. And I think that is very, very tough. So I think that it's hard to give teachers those encouraging words to say, do it, stay in there. But if anything, I hope these essays will remind them that if they're willing to try to give it their own, and also too, I mean, they shouldn't be in it alone. I think parents need to be there and be supportive, and we need to give voice to the idea that teachers are struggling. And we need to try to highlight this around the country, whether it's with your local school district or your state government or federal government. I think parents need to help. But I think if teachers can look at some of, I would hope that they might, people might buy this book for them, give them this kind of encouragement. They will recognize that they are still having an impact on students beyond what they realized, even if they right now don't feel like it's being seen. They are having an impact. So I would say hang in there. It's going to get better. It's bound to get better. We've been through up and down cycles in this country before. In the 70s, we had a big crisis, and the government had a big report and came in and made this a priority. And around the country, we started focusing on teachers and trying to give them more support. So we can only hope that maybe the message may be heard again and things will get better. But you are valued, you are cherished, you are needed, and you are treasured. So I hope teachers hear that.
So that's an important message to teachers. But for others who are reading this book, what new appreciation of teachers do you hope they'll take away?
I hope they'll search their own memories. Think about what they, not everybody. I mean, I've run across 1 or 2 people who said, well, I don't really have that one teacher that I really point to, but I think most people do. So I hope they'll just sort of search their own memories and, sense of nostalgia and just sort of think back to what mattered to them. Sometimes people say, this is the first time I started remembering this teacher or that teacher. Others remember it right there. I hope others will just take from this that there are reasons why you are where you are, possibly. There are reasons why you maybe were able to rise above something that might have been difficult in your life. And a good teacher or a caring teacher might very well be behind that. So, and if you have a teacher who might still be alive, reach out and say thank you. Reach out and remind them. Let them know, if they didn't know already, that they they matter, that they did something in your life. And I think if we can connect some people in that way, I think this will be just absolutely remarkable. And that's my hope.
The book is Lessons Learned and Cherished: The Teacher Who Changed My Life by Deborah Roberts and a host of celebrities. Deborah, thank you for talking with me today.
It was a pleasure. Nice to see you and nice to meet you.
If you'd like to purchase Lessons Learned and Cherished, I've placed a link for you in the description below. And if you'd like to see more videos about books and their authors on a wide variety of topics, be sure to subscribe, like, and click on the bell to be notified about future programs. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.